Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon entitled Leveraging Digital Transformation for a Sustainable Business. You're very welcome to our webinar this afternoon. I, Brenda Clarkin, will be taking you through the first section of the presentation, and we also have a guest speaker, Diane Roberts, who will take you through some real-world examples of implementing a digital transformation strategy and the best way of doing that on that journey. Just to say that these webinars are supporting the wider Digital Transformation Flexible Fund within Northern Ireland, which as a result of the funding that's available through the fund, we are running these webinars to support small and micro businesses to implement some of the key technologies that are supported by the fund. So on the screen at present, I've listed out some of the different webinars that are up and coming. Today's is kicking off around digital transformation. We have some on big data, IoT, process automation, AI, immersive tech, and then around building digital strategy. The webinars run from October to the end of December, and the QR code there on the screen will bring you to a link where you can register your interest in some, or indeed all, of the webinars if they're of interest to you. By way of just of introduction, my name is Brenda Clarkin, and I am a Senior Lecturer of Practice within the Queen's Business School. I teach both undergraduate and postgraduate students, but also do a lot on the executive education side as well. I have a real interest in understanding how technologies work within business, how they can be used to help improve efficiency and drive good business decisions. And hopefully, as we go through the webinar today, I can bring some of that experience to you. Also joining me today is Diane Roberts, who is founder of XP Innovates. And as I mentioned, Diane will be bringing some of her real-world experience and share some of her experiences of implementing digital transformation in some of her clients. You're very welcome, Diane. Just by way of background to the scheme itself, so it's a grant, demand-led grant scheme, and it's all around stimulating digital transformation in small and micro businesses. And as many of you are aware, if you are in a small and micro business, there are many challenges to implementing technologies. And one of the greatest challenges is financial resources. So this fund has been put together to support businesses to enable them to get the benefits from digital technologies. It is there to enable business transformation rather than digitisation. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that as we progress through the presentation today. It is a capital grant programme, okay, and it doesn't provide support for any idea generation in terms of coming up with ideas as to how you might implement the technology. So it's very much a capital scheme. There's 7.5 million in the pot, and it operates across all the councils in Northern Ireland. It's administered by Newrymorn and Down District Council and also supported by Invest NI. In terms of being able to apply for the scheme, there are a number of criteria that you would need to meet. One, to be based in Northern Ireland. You also either have to be a micro or small business, so no more than 50 employees. You have to be VAT registered and actively trading for at least 12 months. So if you're in the position right now where maybe you're not trading 12 months, that does not rule you out from the fund. There are a number of remaining calls on the fund that will spread into next year and the following year. So by then you may be the 12 months, you may have that 12 months registration in place, and therefore the fund becomes applicable for yourself. It's open to all sectors apart from the primary agriculture, forestry and fisheries, and that's because there is a separate fund for that sector. You do have to have a digital transformation plan or some kind of equivalent document. And we do have a session as part of one of our webinars about how you would put that plan together. So I do appreciate, as a small and micro business, having a digital transformation plan might sound quite daunting, but the plan in place for the programme is actually very streamlined and not overly onerous to put together. To make a claim on the fund, you have to be requesting funding for one of the 6 digital technologies that the fund supports, and I'm going to cover some of those on the session today. It is for capital expenditure only, okay, so no revenue expenditure, so that idea generation or continuous subscriptions, things like that wouldn't be covered. And there are obviously compliance with the state aid and de minimis funding levels as well to be considered. In terms of where the fund is now, so it has been running for a period of time. Call number 4 is opening in February, March time next year. However, you can express your interest and produce and submit your EOIs anytime now. So the QR code there will take you to the Digital Transformation Flexible Fund website, where you'll be able to submit your expression of interest. And that is the first stage that you will do to make your claim on the scheme. So I would advise that you read through the Digital Transformation Flexible Fund website. There is lots more detail on there in terms of the criteria and eligibility and the process and the timing of how this all works. And as I say, you can get that on the website. In terms of today's webinar, what we want to do is look at the differences between digitalisation and digital transformation, because the fund is all geared towards digital transformation, and we want to make sure that if you're applying to this fund, that you are pitching yourself in the right space to be eligible for the fund. In terms of digital transformation then, it's a word that's used quite a lot at the minute, but I really want to talk about what it is, why is it necessary, and where do you begin with all of this? What are the challenges associated with it? And then looking at some of the technologies, indeed the 6 technologies that are covered by the fund. After that, I'll pass over to Diane, and she will provide some of her insight into digital transformation from her company perspective. I then want to flag some further help and support for you in terms of applying for the fund, and indeed some wider supports throughout Northern Ireland of organisations that are aligned with the fund and are open to helping businesses apply and execute their digital transformation journeys. And then we'll open up for Q&A. So if you do have a question along the way, feel free to type it into the chat function, and we'll pick that up at the end as part of the wrap up. Okay, so just to begin with, and as I said previously, the fund is all about digital transformation. And the 3 terms that are on the screen there at the minute are sometimes used interchangeably, but they do mean very different things. Digitisation, digitalisation, and then digital transformation. And really, to begin any digital transformation, you do have to begin at the far end with the digitisation. And this is the process of really creating digital data. It's all about moving from your manual records into some kind of digital format, be that text, be that images, or recordings of events. So getting the digital data. And depending on where you are on your transformation journey, you might be at that very first step. And you really do need to do that and do it well before then you move into digitalisation and digital transformation. And it's a great opportunity to think about the type of data that you're capturing and why you're capturing it, because there's no point in creating digital data if you have no further use for it. So it's a good time to audit the type of data that you're gathering. So once you have done the digitization and you have your digital data, the next step on the journey is called digitalisation. And this is where you then start to utilize technology across your business processes so that it's there to help you execute your business processes. So that could be from behind the scenes in terms of the mechanics of how your organization works. So maybe it's to do with your stock management, maybe it's to do with your shop floor, gathering the data through that, or maybe it's to do with how you interact with your customers. So you're using the digital data from the digitization phase along with the technologies to digitalize various processes. After that, then the term digital transformation comes into play. And this for me is a much more broader term in respect of what it actually means on the ground and what it represents. This slide here captures it quite nicely. So digital transformation is absolutely, it's all about the digital infrastructure. So in other words, the digital technologies that you bring into the organization and what you're using them for across those business processes. But it also entails structural changes, cultural changes, and competency changes. So when we say we transform our business or we are trying to digitally transform, it really is that. It's a transformation from top to bottom, from left to right, not just plugging in a number of technologies across the organization. So when we say that we expect to see structural changes as a result of digital transformation, what do we mean? Well, this is all about maybe having to reorganize your organization to embed the digital technology. And very often what we see is hierarchies begin to collapse a little bit to allow the digital transformation to happen with some flow. It's also about removing formalized processes within an organization, because digital transformation, it's not a static thing, it's constantly evolving and therefore requires us as organizations to react to that, but not only to react to it, but react to it timely. And therefore breaking down those hierarchies and those formalized structures can leave the organization more fluid in order to adapt and pivot towards the digital environment that you find yourself in. So maybe rather than having 3 layers of approval for decisions to be made, maybe breaking that down to a much slimmer, more streamlined version of a 1 layer to make sure that the business is a little bit more agile to move in this environment. And we all know that the digital environment is very much fast-paced and ever-changing. We also expect to see cultural shift within the organization. So this is all about making sure that the organization from top to bottom is all about digital. It lives digital, it breathes digital. And that really starts, the journey there, it really begins at the top of the organization. So what is the tone at the top and what is the messaging from the top? Because that then can embed within the organization and can really help with the change management element that will inevitably come with a digital transformation. We are now asking people to do things differently. We are now asking people to integrate technologies in what they do and change their output. So there is an element of change within the workforce there, and ensuring that the communication from the top to the bottom and explaining the rationale for that can help with that cultural shift. We also would expect to see competency changes within organizations. So with the arrival of these new technologies come different skills to be required from our workforces. Skills in terms of digital skills, managing the technology, maybe managing the data going into the technology, or indeed analysing it on the other side. For many, this is a new skill set, and we have to think about how we might address that within our organisations. So is it a matter of upskilling? Is it a matter of reskilling? Do we need to get the resources in from outside the organisation to help embed the transformation in our own? So when we say digital transformation, it really is that transformative process where a business will move towards being a fully digital business. So when you're applying to the fund and you're asked for a digital transformation plan, we do really want to see that the implementation of the technology that you're applying for funding is part of a wider plan, and that you have thought about exactly how this is going to fit into the bigger plan and the bigger scale of your transformation process. So bringing it in a little bit closer then, I've just put a few points on the slide here. So it really is, digital transformation is really about addressing customer need. And digital transformation should always be customer focused, customer centric. And that will really help drive sustainable business, because you'll have a sustainable relationship with your customer. At the end of the day, it's what your customer wants that you should deliver on. And what they want drives your whole business in terms of what you're producing and how you're producing that, be it either a product or service. So really understanding your customer is important. And that's something we do need to take stock on. How well do we know our customers? Are we close to them? Could we be closer? And how might we do that? So that might be a challenge for you to think about in terms of trying to drive your digital transformation strategy. Having these technologies come on board can help leverage innovation and technology to propel the company forward. So I've seen some great examples of companies introducing digital technology and to utilize it in ways that has pivoted the organization in a different direction and embedded that innovation within it. So utilizing the technologies might broaden horizons in terms of what you might be able to offer to your customers. But again, you do need a good understanding of what your customer actually wants before being able to deliver that. And there's one example here about Netflix. Okay, so before Netflix arrived on the scene, many of us would have went down to our old Blockbusters. We would have scanned the walls of all the little DVD boxes. We picked what we want, we watched it, and we returned it. And there was no sort of real data gathering there of what we watched and for how long we kept the DVD and all of that. But think about Netflix, okay? So you turn on Netflix and there's a whole pile of recommendations there sitting waiting for you. And that's basically as a result of them gathering data on you. So what type of programs do you like? Are you more into drama or suspense, or maybe you're more into comedy? Do you like watching it, you know, in 45-minute blocks or hour blocks? All of that data they put into a recommendation engine that makes those recommendations to you. So that is really understanding what your customer wants and delivering that. Because if you just went into the world of Netflix trying to find something that you really liked, you could get lost in the amount of material that's there. So having those recommendations made to you is a valuable service that Netflix provide. And therefore, they do really have a close relationship with their customers by following the data trail that we leave for them. Just noted there on the slide, 55% of startups already have adopted a digital transformation strategy. And that is very much where you begin on this journey. But before I look at strategy, I just want to highlight, why is it necessary? So why do you need to digitally transform? And why is it really buzzwords of the moment? Well, a number of benefits we see coming out are listed on the slide there. So we do see improved customer experience and engagement. So getting to know what the customer wants, as I mentioned before, and then delivering on it. Increased efficiencies. So our processes are happening faster, less human error, and more value add processes, and maybe reducing the non-value adds. Improved decision making. And that's a real benefit of something like data analytics, where you are then able to make decisions based on real hard data in comparison to maybe how we made decisions a number of years ago in our organizations. It was to do with experience or your gut feel or what you thought was the case. But now we really have data-driven decisions. So we have data that is steering us in terms of decisions that we make. It can help transform the business. And, you know, in an age where trying to secure employees within businesses and to attract and retain them, you know, being able to be in that transformation journey could be one element in which you can keep those employees engaged with your own organization. And it is really helping innovation. There's been so many examples of companies that have benefited from the technology in ways beyond they ever believed. And do you have to be a really digitally focused organization to go down the digital route? Well, no, you don't. And many of our traditional organizations here in Northern Ireland have adopted technologies on a piecemeal basis and are getting great benefits from that. So if you're enthused enough to go down this route and you think you can get a benefit from this, where do you start? Well, there is no doubt the right place to start with all of this is strategy, and to build a digital transformation strategy. Because without a plan, you don't have an idea of the stepping stones that you want to, the stepping stones along the way for you to achieve your objective. So you do need to look at where you are now and where you want to go to, and then look to see, well, what technology or what digital tools can help me get there? One of the biggest reasons why digital transformations fail is that there is a lack of a plan. And indeed, I have heard numerous stories across entities in Northern Ireland where people have, for want of a better term, jumped on the bandwagon because there are lots of new buzzy technologies out there. And once they implemented the technology, the feedback was, well, I didn't get as much value from that as I thought, or it didn't deliver what I wanted it to do. So you do really need to think about, is this the right technology for me? Not because other people are adopting it or other people are using it. But where is your strategic direction, and is it appropriate to you? So in terms of creating this digital transformation strategy, what is it that we're seeing companies doing? Well, it tends to be one of two things. Most organizations will have a strategy of some description. And so what some organizations are doing are taking that strategy and layering it up with digital aspects. So they're blending the two together. Other organizations are taking the opportunity to go back to a blank canvas and essentially start with a blank piece of paper and build up a transformation strategy, really thinking about being innovative in terms of how they run their organization and where they want that organization to go. But either way, having that digital strategy will help in terms of some of the challenges that I'll discuss later on about implementing digital transformation, because it gives you a solid direction, plan, document, which you then can share throughout the organization, and particularly around that change management that I talked about earlier, where you're now asking people to do things differently. The first question that they're going to want to understand is, how does this impact me, and why am I having to do this? And having that strategic document can go a long way in terms of delivering the answers to that. So a little bit of market analysis here, just to give you a flavour of where other organisations are. So although 87% of businesses believe that digital technologies will disrupt their industry, only 44% of them have a plan to deal with this. So even though many industries feel that there are going to be disruptions, there isn't really enough there in terms of plans to deal with that. And you can see the impact that that will have in terms of reducing market share for those organisations, and you really are on a lifeline at that point. Market pressures are the primary drivers of digital transformation, with growth opportunities and increased pressure driving most efforts. So a bit more on the reactive side rather than the proactive side. So markets are putting pressures on organisations to go digital. I think this is a great opportunity to get ahead of that. And to think about what you can do differently to others in your market to secure your footing, be the disruptor rather than to be the disrupted. And only 23% of businesses are not reliant on digital products or services. So in other words, the majority of businesses do rely on some form of digital product or service. And that's really telling, and a lot of change has happened in the last number of years to reflect that. And what we do need to consider now is the impact on customers. There is now a great expectation for customers that digital tools, digital products and services will be offered by companies. And therefore, if you're not in that space, you could be losing out as a result. So some of the challenges we see to digital transformation, one of the biggest ones is culture. And all coming down to the fact that there's going to be a lot of change coming with the technologies. And how then can you embed that change and ensure that change is successfully managed within the organization? And this does link back to the strategy and having that communication of such a strategy from the top end of the organization right down. Because at the end of the day, a workforce or an individual within a workforce, there's only one thing that concerns them. How does this impact me? How does this change impact me? How does this technology impact me? And therefore, to be able to answer those questions, relay those fears, provide the confidence to that workforce to engage with what you're doing, you need a clear line of communication from the top to the bottom of the organization. So that tone of the top is incredibly important, but equally then how the management structures beneath that carry that message right down to the individual. Some examples here of, before digital transformation, we are firm believers in research. We never speak to our customers. So really depending on their own sort of research rather than actually talking to customers. And we keep track of our research papers and know our decisions are based on evidence. To afterwards moving to be much more customer-centric focused. We know our customers better now, and we base what we do on customer feedback. And that filters into that strategy then to help with that mindset change of how that will be pushed down through the organization. So like I said, this is one of the key areas that can lead to the downfall in a successful digital transformation, and shouldn't be underestimated how you might deal with this within your own organization. Another challenge with implementing a digital transformation is just a lack of IT resources and management. So not only maybe getting the technologies into the organization, but how do you run them? How do you manage them? How do you utilize them within the organization? At the minute, and I'm sure most people will sense this, there is a huge lack of digital skills in the marketplace. And that's really because digital transformation isn't unique to one industry. This is not something that's happening only in the pharmaceutical industry or only in the education industry. It's happening across the board, and there's only so many heads with the skills in the marketplace at the minute. So therefore, you need to think, how am I going to address this? What are my options? Do I invest in my current workforce and upskill them, get them trained up in the necessary technologies? Do I bring in people from the outside into the organization to help share their knowledge around the organization? Or do I need the skills within the organization at all? Could I outsource this to another company or another organization to do this for me in the short term, maybe while you're testing the waters, with a view then longer term to bringing the skill set in? So it is a real viable problem in the marketplace at the minute. There are a number of avenues to explore in terms of trying to solve that problem, but it all does require a plan, and that's coming back to our strategic document. In terms of a case example, I have here just one about Amazon. I do appreciate that the Digital Transformation Flexible Fund is small and micro businesses, but a lot of the learnings we have around digital transformation do come from these multinational companies. So here we have an example of a company that has killed retail. So you have Amazon there worth 1.4 trillion. And then all of these other companies on the right-hand side, household names, Walmart, Home Depot, Costco, etc., all of them combined, and these are all bricks and mortar industries, just over the £1 trillion mark or dollar mark. So that Amazon entering into that market, you know, none of these competitors here, the bricks and mortar competitors, saw this happening. But along came some digital tools and a digital platform, and Amazon now is worth much more than all of these combined. So it just goes to show you how an industry that you may think is fairly solid and fairly sort of set in stone and secure, how it can be disrupted by, in this case, IT platforms. And there are many more examples of this. I mean, even thinking about the hospitality industry, and since the arrival of Airbnb, which again is really just a platform bringing two different parties together, people who have properties to rent with people who want to rent some properties. So that disrupted that whole marketplace. Similarly with the likes of Uber, the list does go on. So there's very few industries that haven't been touched by digital. So the challenge to you is, where do you sit on all of this? You know, could there be something brewing in your industry that you need to be ready for and be prepared to deal with from a digital perspective? Or maybe you are the disruptor. Maybe you're the one that's one step ahead. Okay, so then I just want to move into some of the key technologies around digital transformation. And the ones listed here are ones that are supported by the Digital Transformation Flexible Fund. So we just want to run through them, and then I will hand over to Diane. The first one there is the Internet of Things and 5G. The Internet of Things as a technology, it is all about connected devices. It's about devices that have sensors that sense many number of things these days. The expanse of what sensors are out there is phenomenal. So be it movement, be it light, be it speed, be it temperature, be it torque, be it pressure, lots of things lots of sensors are out there available to gather information. So the Internet of Things devices are devices with these sensors. They gather data. The data is then analyzed and normally returned to the user in a dashboard or something that's more user friendly rather than analyzing the base data. From that, then you can make more informed decisions because you have the information in front of you. It works quite well with the new generation of mobile networks, the 5G, because as it gathers more information, it needs more bandwidth to gather it, analyzing it, and bring it back to the user. Just to put this into perspective, to give a quick example, many of you may have, the fitness tracker watches, and you'll see the little green light underneath it, gathering information about you in terms of your step count and how well you've slept and your stress levels. Oh, that's IoT. That's a device with a sensor connected to the internet, gathering information, and then you'll take that, you look it up on the app, and you have all the information which you might make some lifestyle decisions as a result of that. So that is one of the technologies supported by the program. Robotics, okay, and automation, and really a good growth area, particularly in the manufacturing sector in NI. So this is the use of robotics and cobotics, so the robots that work alongside humans, to automate tasks that are time-consuming, that are monotonous, that are repetitive in nature, okay? And the benefit of that, it boosts productivity, it improves safety, and it improves time as well. Where have we seen this being used? Manufacturing industries. So some organizations using these on assembly lines to put products together. It have been used in inventory management. So sending a robot into your warehouse to pick the raw materials that you need on the assembly line, or even at the back end of that process, using robotics and cobotics to pick and package the material before being dispatched to the customer. We also see it in surgeries and treatments, robotics now being used to do some minor medical procedures. So it goes to show the sophistication level of these robotics. And thankfully, price-wise as well, as time goes on and there's new providers into the market, the price of these robotics are now starting to come down. Another key technology then is big data and analytics. This is not a new technology. Let's face it, we have been analysing data for years. But the direction of travel here is really insightful, and I find it very, very interesting. For years, we have been great at analysing data based on past transactions or past events. Okay, so maybe we looked at, from a financial point of view, how our sales have trended over the past 3 years, or how our cost base has moved in the past 6 months. Or maybe we've been tracking data about our flow through on our shop floor. It has been all backward looking and analysing and understanding why maybe certain events and conditions have arisen. But what's really interesting in this space now is that we are moving forward. We are moving into an era of analytics that is forward looking, and it fits in with where AI is on this. We are using data, past data, to try and make predictions of what might happen in the future. I mean, much more powerful as a means of helping to steer an organization in a particular direction or make more insightful decisions, because we are now having that forward-looking piece. So it's been used, where have I seen it been used? It's been used for demand forecasting. So trying to understand what the demand for your product or service is going to be based on what has happened in the past. I mean, getting that number right, or certainly being in the ballpark of where that is super powerful for an organization, because that demand drives everything else. It drives how much you need coming through your supply chain. It drives how many employees you need in your workforce. It drives what kind of machinery and equipment you need to deliver on all of that. So to be able to get closer to that exact number, so you're not overstocking or understocking or missing revenue opportunities or tying up your cash in terms of your stock, can be really, really beneficial. So there's a nice trajectory going forward as to where we see this moving to. Virtual reality, okay, another really useful technology. And this is where you may have seen them before, the headsets that you put on, the little graphic shows it there, and you're brought into a completely simulated environment. All right. We're seeing this being used across the board to help with training. So even pilots are using this as a means of stacking up their flying hours. Surgeons are using it because there's not enough human bodies around for medical research. And so they're training in a virtual environment. Hotel groups like the Hilton are using this as a means of training their staff. We have organisations here in Northern Ireland using it in the construction industry to train people up in terms of how to use pieces of equipment before they actually do it in reality. There are so many use cases here. Tourism is another fantastic example of where we see this working. So with that ability to replicate environments and give you that completely simulated environment. Augmented reality, another powerful tool as well. This is where you impose digital images on the real world. So it's more connected with the real world than the virtual reality because it's a completely simulated environment. Augmented reality, we are just imposing digital images on the real world. So where do we see this working? Remote expert assistance. So if you have a field engineer coming out to fix a piece of equipment, the ability to use augmented reality to help that field engineer fix that piece of equipment is really powerful. Learning and development, complex manufacturing. Boeing have been using, and Airbus have been using augmented reality for a number of years on their assembly lines. And they use it as part of training for their operatives in terms of the very intricate wiring that has to happen on the fuselages as they come down the line. So if you're able to sort of impose a digital image of what you're doing in the real world to show you, okay, well, at the very basic elements, where does this yellow wire need to go to? Where does this red wire need to go to? And to have that digital image in front of you while you're doing the work really can be beneficial for training and for executing the task accurately the first time. And that was one of the big benefits that Airbus got from that, is that their first past the post, as it were, in other words, get it right first time, was up in the early 90s as a result of using augmented reality. So lots of use cases there as well. It's also a great one to engage your customers at an earlier stage of your customer journey. Take, for example, IKEA. So when I say IKEA, the first thing you think of is probably flat pack furniture. But IKEA have moved into the space of augmented reality through an app, and you may have used this before. It's called the IKEA Place app. So this allows you to scan your room with your device at home, your smartphone, scan the room, and maybe pop in one of their sofas into the room, or maybe a big red rug in the middle of the room. And that engages you as a customer at a very early stage on your customer journey with IKEA. Even before you go through the doors, you may already have maybe halfway there to picking a product by just using their augmented reality app. Now, you compare that experience to maybe a traditional manufacturing shop, maybe 10 miles down the road from you. The difference of the customer experience there is that the customer who goes 10 miles down the road to the factory, to the local furniture shop, their customer journey only begins when they walk through the doors. And they'll spend some time looking at products, they'll take some measurements, get a sense of the color, come back to the house, check it all out, and might go back. So there's a bit of to and froing there. Whereas IKEA have engaged their customers much earlier on in the comfort of their own home. And the likelihood of them actually going forward and purchasing that product is probably much higher than those who actually go to the furniture shop down the road. So you have to think about, again, the customer experience and hooking that customer on earlier. And now that places like IKEA do this, there is an expectation among customers that other providers will do the same. So are you up there in terms of delivering what the customers now expect? Or maybe you're further down the line in terms of needing to do something. And this is where the fund comes into play, giving you the funding to help implement some of these technologies. AI and machine learning, I've touched on it a little bit already. AI is one of these technologies that is really super data heavy. Okay, so it does require a lot of data. It analyzes that data and it tries to make predictions of what the future events might be. And even some of the AI models are going as far as to recommend courses of action that you should take. So they're integrated in lots of different ways. Lots of us will have seen the rise in generative AI through the likes of ChatGPT. And that's all great for the developments in content generation. If you need to be constantly producing marketing material or things like that for your organization, using AI for that can be very powerful. So there's lots of use cases right across industries where that's coming through. The last one then is blockchain. So blockchain is a relatively new technology. It is one that has emerged back around the time of the financial crisis. And this technology is all about storing data in a very secure way. Okay. So it has lots of security features that we have not come across in current storage spaces before. So there's all these elements of cryptography. There is a whole webinar on blockchain, so I'll not go into too much detail here. But at its very basic sense, it is a place to store data securely. We are seeing this gain a little bit more momentum through Northern Ireland, particularly in the space of supply chain. So the idea that a customer would be able to come along and see the whole supply chain of where their product originated from, how it was processed, how it was moved through the logistics, and how then it arrived at the shelf or where the customer has purchased the good. So, like I say, some organizations in NI have been asked to come onto blockchains to verify their part in that supply chain with the view to providing more information to consumers about the authenticity and the provenance of where their goods have come from. And that's where I want to just finish it in terms of understanding digital transformation, how it differs from the digitalisation and digitisation, and then the 6 key technologies that are supported by the Digital Transformation Fund. I have a slide there just that wraps it all up quite neatly, which you can read there. And I will also now pass across to Diane Roberts, and we're very delighted to have Diane on the call today. Diane, I will just stop sharing my slides here and you can share and introduce yourself to our cohort today. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Brenda. That was fascinating discussion, and in fact, there's a lot of things that you've said that I'm probably going to say as well, but probably from a different perspective. So let me just find my presentation. I don't think it's going to be as easy as I thought it was going to be. Green, okay. Window. No, I don't seem to be able to see my presentation. Brenda, would you just?
I can share, Diane, and if you just let me know when you want to move slide, that's absolutely fine.
That would be great. Okay, so apologies for that, guys. We didn't get a chance to do a run through before we started, but yeah, so let me begin. So Diane Roberts, I've been working with all sorts of organizations for over 20 years, unfortunately. And I suppose what I've been working with companies from being early startups, being through to SMEs, university spin-outs, and actually quite large companies. And over those 20 years, I have created, I suppose, a framework or a methodology that I have put together that I always use to my clients mentally in my head, but really over the last 18 months, I've just managed to get that into what I call Growth Sprint, which is an innovation toolkit, essentially aimed at companies that really want to have a plan. Maybe go on to the next slide. So Growth Sprint really came out of my need when I sat down with clients to really work through where the issues actually were in the organization. Because typically when you sit down and you start talking to a company about one part of the organization, problems in many other parts of the organization start to emerge. And then suddenly, what emerged, as a small consulting assignment can become this huge mountain. So what I have tried to do within Growth Sprint is really to put on one page a strategic plan for growth. So if I kind of then bring that into what we're actually talking about today. And where do you start, I suppose, is the answer. Because if you look across either small or medium-sized organizations, there's not a part of the organization that probably doesn't need some sort of innovation or some sort of digitalization. And hopefully, talking a little bit about my tool and some of the experiences that I have, I might be able to help you kind of make you take those steps in more baby steps, and work out where this can start. Because in the truth, you know, this grant is a £20,000 capital grant. It's not going to transform your business from start to finish, but you need to actually start somewhere or tackle some sort of issue. So maybe we'll go on to the next one. Yes. So my view of life is that you know, you have to adapt or be disrupted. Technology is reshaping many industries. I mean, Brenda's given some good examples from the major retailers, but you only have to look at what's happening in recruitment. You know, no longer are people sitting reading CVs or writing job specs to actually go up on LinkedIn. All of this is done through a data analytics, looking for keyword searching, etc. And again, the same thing is happening to the legal industry. You know, low grade legal advice and guidance is easily achieved through either online contracting, which has allowed a whole load of new entrants into the market, or through technologies. And I also think customer expectations are changing. I mean, I talk about this philosophy of falling in love with your customer. And that really is falling in love with what your customer wants and really understanding what those digital experiences are. I mean, most people under 30 now don't want to pick up a phone. They don't want to fill in a form. They want that access on their mobile phone. They want that that ability to be able to interact in a very strong and engaging way with companies and with brands, but without the traditional methods that we would be used to. For example, who would have believed, you know, that people would have been buying cars online? You know, it's that ability to be able to bring the real life experience online, or to actually digitize that. And those who don't embrace digital transformation will risk actually falling behind. And a lot of that's got to do with the speed of change and the pace of change. And I think that also goes hand in hand with sustainability. Businesses have to balance economic growth with environmental and social responsibility. And again, our consumers and customers, this is now an expectation. It's no longer optional, it's absolutely important. You know, people are making real decisions about different brands based on their sustainability. And you only have to look at the rise of the B Corp phenomenon across Ireland and the UK. The UK has got the biggest amount of B Corps that there is. And just to give a very quick intro into what a B Corp is, I mean, a B Corp is a company that has at the heart of it not only responsibilities to shareholders, but also to employees and to the planet. So sustainability is extremely important, as well as the digitalization. So what have I done? So what we've tried to do is make this quite simple for people. What we've tried to do is allow you to do a plan on one page. It is a collaborative, action-oriented framework that it looks not only at the market that you're in, but in terms of what you need to do as an organization. We have a key point in that we focus on a single strategic objective. So what's the one thing that you want to do within your organization? and what are those business outcomes. So working through what your single strategic objective actually could be can sometimes be the easiest way for you to do that. So, you know, it could be about increasing sales. It could be about reducing costs. I mean, I'll give you one example. We had a company down in Waterford, and they employed over 160 people. They manufactured metal parts, very big metal parts. So everything from tanks for tractors right through to the little BT boxes that you see on the sides of the road. And our single strategic objective with this company was that we wanted to stop the throughput of employees. So while they employed 150 people, they lost 36 people a year. And the only way that we were able to actually fix that product or that problem was actually around digitalization. So it stopped being a HR problem and it started being a productivity issue. And what we found when we looked deep into the company was that while they had SAP and Oracle, which was running their major processes, the rest of the organization actually run on emails and spreadsheets. And this culture was absolutely embedded from the top down. There was this idea, you know, that spending on anything outside of production you know, was somehow frivolous spending rather than actually in terms of increasing revenue. So if you can focus sometimes on your single strategic objective, it sometimes takes away where you think the problem is if you can actually look at it with a new lens. And again, you know, it's a typical SMART, you know, specific, measurable, achievable, and time bound. So where we start with Growth Sprint is that we actually use the customer section to analyze the customer behavior. And this is really, really understanding of what your customers actually want, how they want it, how they want to buy it, and how they actually want to pay for it. And Brenda talked about the first stage in this being in terms of collecting your data. You know, your sales data, your sales order processing data, your inquiries data is sometimes the most important data that you can actually digitize within the organization. So that's where products like HubSpot and intensive CRMs are actually a really first step in terms of actually understanding your customers. So being able to say, you know, who were the last 100 customers who spent more than £60,000 with us or more than £100,000 with us? Who were the customers that actually bought this product but didn't actually buy that product? So having that internal data and then matching that to outside data actually can be very powerful. And then it's about creating digital customer personas, not only of the customers you have, but also the customers you would actually like to have as part of your clients. And then in the market section, that's about actually looking at the digital trends, emerging technologies that are actually going to disrupt your industry. And it's considering everything from, you know, the typical pest analysis or Porter's 5 forces, but really looking at where that growth is. And where I find this extremely important, this whole market section, is when people start to look out of their sphere of influence, outside of the current market that they're currently in. You know, so many companies, you know, only sell into Northern Ireland or only sell into Ireland and in the UK. And being able to actually expand what that market is and using a digitalization strategy to be able to go after that market, which eliminates things like, you know, packaging issues, supply chain. I mean, that's where Amazon got their advantage. So looking at all of that stuff and actually saying, not saying we can't sell there, but actually saying, how can we sell there? And a lot of those issues have been solved by bigger companies that allow you to actually do that. So at the center of all this is, of course, the value proposition and how you can create that digital value for your customers. And how you are actually going to really create the benefits of transformation, as a convenience, personalization, sustainability, whatever it is. What's that edge? What's that thing that actually makes you stand out? So all of that really is what's driving the market. And you really have to be focused on what the market is telling you, or you will lose out. You will lose market share, or you will fail to grow. You will fail to that growth sprint, because the market is telling you what you need to be doing as an organization. And then on the left-hand side of growth sprint is then we look at what you are in control of. Okay, so what are the 4 areas within any business you're control of? So finance and funding, what your product actually is, what your resources are, what your team and your people resources actually are, and then how you're actually going to sales and market that. And across all of that is digitalization. And looking at how digitalization works right across the 4 pillars of the organization is a skill in itself, but it's an absolute area where you will find innovation that you actually need. So some of the common pitfalls I've seen companies fall into, I think it is the comfort of familiarity versus the unknown. I think, if you present yourself with a customer service problem, or you present yourself with, a production issue, it's so much easier to employ people to actually fix that problem, because that is, it's something that we're very familiar with. We know how to recruit people, we know how to fire people, we know how to actually, incorporate them in the organization. But actually digitalization, or even digital transformation, is something we don't know. It is a set of unknowns. We don't know if we're going to invest that capital sum, whether it's actually going to give us the return that we need. So sometimes it's just easier to fall back into the comfort of familiarity. And, most processes are known in that area. So to kind of implement a digital transformation requires us going into the unknown. We don't know. We don't know how this is going to work. We don't know what the processes are. We don't know how many people we're going to save, etc. And really, that comfort blanket of familiarity is something that most organizations actually fall back on. Next one. Then there's also this view, that capital investment is risky. And challenging the view that digital transformation now has to be a capital investment. If you listen to some of the discussions that Brenda brought up there, to introduce any type of VR or robotics or any, all-encompassing technology is a capital investment. And probably one way that you could use this grant is in piloting some of that stuff, rather than using it completely to transform an organization. So shifting the emphasis from it being an off-balance sheet spending to actually being a capital major commitment is really important in how you reimagine and reframe your digital transformation. The difficulty I found with a lot of companies is actually in terms of actually getting the skills. Okay, so what's the skills that people need? It's very hard to recruit these skills, and I know Brenda said you have a couple options. You can outsource, or you can hire in skills. My experience has been outsourcing will take you only so far. Because an outsourcing company really is there to build, to build their business. They're not there to build your business. To hire in these skills can be very difficult. And my absolute advice is anyone who's working for an organization should be really thinking about, stepping forward and getting these skills, because you'll be extremely employable going forward in the future. People who who are running these businesses, I would say invest in your own internal team, reskilling and upskilling, because these are skills that that you absolutely need going forward. So I think team building is hugely important. And I suppose really shifting the success of metrics. Traditionally we've assessed companies over assets and how many people they actually employ. I think the future measure has to be around productivity. And productivity is going to be the driver that differentiates, I think, companies in terms of their success, because this aligns with digital transformation goals. Who would have thought, 15, 20 years ago, we'd be sitting here with 1.8% unemployment in Northern Ireland. To actually get people into jobs now is actually really difficult. So productivity has to be the single strategic objective for most companies. And then I suppose recently I've just come across this new way of actually measuring objectives, which is it's called FAST. It's just come out from the Harvard Business Review, and that is really around setting objectives that are frequently shared, that there are it is aligned and it's ambitious, that it is actually shared continuously, and that it's actually transformational. So thinking about those things and bringing it where, as Brenda says, within the full culture of the organization is hugely important. And then just quickly, this is what a growth sprint canvas will look like. We move on to the next one, Brenda. And really what we do, we look at it in three different ways. We look at statements in terms of what we want to achieve. And then we look at it in two other ways: our analysis, what are the actions we need, and what are the risks. And the risks are hugely important, especially in this area around transformation, because the truth is, until you understand the risks, you won't be able to make these decisions. So outlining the risks and assessing the risks as you go through this is key to part of our discussion. And then lastly, my view is that you do this in a very agile way, so that you look at 30, 60, 90-day framework and break down your roadmap into manageable tasks. Create assigned actions, set deadlines, and track progress. That's the only way that you will actually do that growth sprint. That's the only way that you will actually make these projects happen. And that's me. So thank you for listening, and I hope I've helped a little bit in terms of your digital strategy. And please link in with me, and certainly reach out to me if you think I can help.
Thank you very much, Diane, for that really insightful session there, and fits really well with what we had covered previously. So thank you. So just in terms of further support, so if you think this Digital Transformation Flexible Fund is something that you could benefit from, there are a number of different organisations across Northern Ireland that have aligned themselves to the programme and are happy to help. So ourselves, first of all, through the Clinton Leadership Institute, I'll speak to that in a minute. We also have a new innovation centre. The further education colleges are also involved, helping people design and build up their digital transformation plans. Ulster has a fantastic smart manufacturing hub. So if it's in terms of smart factories or data analytics, that type of IoT, they would be great to contact for that. We have schemes like Go Succeed, which are additional funding schemes to help organisations move in this direction. Innovate NI are great as well in terms of signposting and providing support in this space. And then you might have other avenues that you could explore, maybe through mentors or consultants through your business. There's lots more information on each of these bodies and what support they can provide on that DTFF website. So do have a good look through that. Just picking up in terms of ourselves at the Clinton Leadership Institute. So we do run a number of leadership courses. Here are a blend of a few that are in the area of digital technology. We have strategic change leadership for digital transformation and emerging technologies, and data analytics and decision making. So do have a look through our website, see if any of those are appealing to you, depending on the stage of your digital transformation journey. And we do also have a YouTube channel where you can access all of these webinars. As I said, if you are interested in joining some or all, do scan the QR code there and sign up for the various sessions. And if you can't make them, you can always access them on the YouTube channel. And that brings us round to Q&A. So I'll just stop sharing here and I'll just check in on our chat function to see if we have any questions.
There's one there on the question of risk that I'm happy to kind of pick up on, Brenda.
Sure.
If you want to, I suppose risk really, it depends on which area of the organization actually is. But when we're looking at risk, you know, we have a scale of, 5 to 1. 5 would be, highly, likely, and 1 highly unlikely, and somewhere in between really is the answer. And what we do is we put them into a risk matrix. And when we're actually talking through our strategy, risk is always something that we actually cover at each and every meeting. Has the risk actually profile changed? Have it made it less risky? Have we made it more risky? And I find that when you talk through the risk areas, it actually helps people make decisions quickly, especially senior management. Because if you can actually outline the risk and people then are able to accept what that risk is, and you see the mitigating circumstances for each of the risks, it can sometimes make that emotional decision to invest an awful lot easier.
Hopefully that has answered your question. Thank you for that, Diane. I see there's been a bit of communication through the chat function, and Sean, you have been replying to those, so thank you for that. Dennis has just asked at the end if the slides are going to be provided to attendees. The recording certainly will be on YouTube, Dennis, so you can access the slides from there, and Sean has also put in some text there as well. I hope I've picked up all the unanswered questions there, and we have finished up in good time. So listen, thank you very much to everyone who has attended the webinar today. We'd be delighted to see you coming through with applications for the Digital Transformation Fund. So do have a think about if you can get the benefit from this, and come along to the other webinars, because they are really insightful in terms of the types of technologies, and will be good to sort of show where you might apply them as well. So sometimes it's about getting an understanding of the applicability of these that might get you thinking in a different direction or a little bit more innovatively. So yeah, thank you very much for joining, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinars. Thank you very much. Bye now.